So Emily, what's on your radar?
Well, the legal battle between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard is hard to follow, and admittedly, I'm not swamped in the granular details like so many people are, but the case centers around a Washington Post op-ed written by Heard back in 2018. Except it wasn't written by Heard. Her name is on the byline, but she didn't write the op-ed. The ACLU did. Now, ghostwriting is hardly uncommon, but Heard's op-ed came into existence under very dubious circumstances. Depp is suing over one line. Quote, 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out, it reads. Now, Heard is countersuing on the basis that Depp's lawyer referred to her allegations as a hoax. So that's what's happening in this court case. That's what's going on in Virginia right now. Documents obtained by Depp's legal team throw open the hood of our media machine. Emails show that Heard agreed to donate $3.5 million to the ACLU in exchange for a title of an ambassador for gender justice. She literally bought credentials from an elite institution. Now, she also didn't pay, yet at least, but that's another story. The ACLU wrote Heard's op-ed and pitched it to the Washington Post as part of a public relations campaign. Already, we have a problem right there. The ACLU is siding with Heard. The ACLU, not the Women's March or now, the ACLU. Why this institution that exists to protect civil liberties felt the need to put their thumb on the scale for Heard against Depp without any semblance of due process is a serious question. Now, the Washington Post then took the op-ed from the ACLU and published it with this line intact. Now, that line is a bombshell. It's only 26 words, but it's a bombshell. With those 26 words, Heard accused another human being of a heinous crime in one of the biggest newspapers in the world, period. In the Washington Post letter. There was no comment from Depp, even as a footnote. The ACLU lent this accusation their credibility, and then the Post did too. We still don't even know if it's true. But in the heat of the Trump era, there was no time or need for the usual standards. While papers like the New York Times and the Washington Post were doing some serious shoe leather work, whether it was on Harvey Weinstein or others, the same outlets were undermining that work and the credibility by undermining their credibility as news institutions. And in the process, they were undermining our cultural standards while they sought to improve them. So if you go back and look at the full op-ed from December of 2018, the ACLU was sure to use Heard's bombshell accusation as a way to lobby against part of Betsy DeVos's then forthcoming Title IX reforms. Of course, those are being reformed again now under the Biden administration, as we've discussed here, and in ways that deserve serious attention. The ACLU actually explicitly pitched the piece in the context of Trump to Heard's publicist. These emails are incredible. Quote, I'd like your and Amber's thoughts on doing an op-ed in which she discusses the ways in which survivors of gender-based violence have been made less safe under the Trump administration and how people can take action, the staffer wrote to Heard's publicist. It's partisan right there. Now, it's hard to remember exactly how frenzied those months of the Me Too movement were. It was an eruption. This story, then, is kind of a disturbing case study in how quickly our norms crumble when social tensions peak. The institutions who boast about being our great bulwarks, who play with their power so freely, they crumble first. They facilitate these incremental declines, and then they lash out when people don't trust them or don't take them seriously enough. This is a vicious cycle. They trade their credibility for clicks and partisanship, then marvel at the wreckage of our culture and ask for more power over the rest of us. That's what the cycle looks like. We need a robust ACLU precisely to defend due process rights and our rights when it's hardest, because the accused person is least sympathetic at any given moment. We need a robust fourth estate for the same reason. That's not what we have. We have a bunch of partisan backslappers adrift from a coherent and virtuous moral foundation. It's a complete joke. Ryan, I don't think we need to weigh in this case or adjudicate the guilt of either Heard or Depp, or whether this defamation suit, there's the actual malice standard, which is kind of an interesting question in and of itself, is legitimate. We don't even need to do that. But if you look at these ACLU, it's a separate question. It's an important question, but it's a separate question. If you look at these emails the ACLU sent to Heard's publicist and the Washington Post, it's a great glimpse into how these institutions function, and how they're sort of willing to give people like Amber Heard these ambassador for gender justice titles, because she pledges $3.5 million, which again, she hasn't paid yet, but you're just buying your credibility without really any justification for it.
I mean, it is a window into institutional drift and how the need to constantly be fundraising can distort or can warp, the way, the original mission that an organization set out to do. I do want to defend Amber Heard for 1 second here, though, and apparently that's not a very popular thing to do. But so in this Washington Post op-ed, she wrote,
she didn't write it.
What the ACLU wrote. 2 years ago, I became a public figure representing domestic abuse, and I felt the full force of our culture's wrath for women who speak out. So she became a public figure representing domestic abuse because an English tabloid referred to Johnny Depp as a wife beater. He then sued the tabloid. The defamation laws in Britain are extremely loose. Like, you can win defamation suits quite easily. Yet, despite that, a judge in that case took a look at a bunch of different instances that were presented to the court, and found something like a dozen of them to be credible instances, and said, you know what, your defamation suit is thrown out. Like, the newspaper was justified in using the phrase wife beater to describe you, and that became this giant issue. And so for her to say that she became a public figure representing domestic abuse was completely true, because that was a giant scandal around domestic abuse, and she was at the center of it. And this judge said, look, this was a fair description here. So just wanted to put that. And also, let me quibble with the point on Trump too. It's not just random partisanship. The guy was accused by more than a dozen women, quite credibly,
right,
of assault, of various, of not just harassment, but some sexual assault. And then if you remember, 2 weeks before the election, that tape emerged of him doing his quote unquote locker room talk, which is what he later talked about, that very, very famous tape that everybody's heard 100 times. So it's not as if it just bubbled up out of just a pure, naked partisanship. There was something underneath it that had women thinking, it's shocking that despite all of these credible allegations and despite him admitting to it on tape, he was still elected president. And so I think that's what produced the cultural moment beyond just mere partisanship.
Right. But I think the ACLU pitching it to Amber Heard's publicist with that hook, I think, and then talking about Betsy DeVos in the op-ed itself. I mean, again, if you're the ACLU, I completely understand how this is your hook for you to push your advocacy. But again, you're the ACLU and you're jumping on one person's side of this pretty difficult question. And I think that's what this trial has shown, that if you are Amber Heard and you have all of these accusations, then Johnny Depp, this is a messy relationship period, has all of these accusations actually against Amber Heard, who has admitted to hitting him, now in defense of her sister, is what she says. This is a very complicated situation. I think that's what explains why people are so compelled by it, because it seems as though this was going in both directions. And again, I just think using Trump as a hook was cynical. I think pushing against jumping on Heard's side to push against Title IX reform was cynical. And I do think it was interesting that the Washington Post kind of bought this from the ACLU, which in and of itself had kind of bought from Heard this opportunity to push its it's partisan. I would say partisan in the Trump era. The ACLU was sort of
It
always
became
going
very
in a
partisan. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I find it all very cynical. And this is all separate from the question of who's right or wrong. But the ACL, which is an important question again, but the ACLU saying, I'm going to put my thumb on the scale, or we're going to put our thumb on the scale for Amber Heard here, and we're going to write this accusation as though it is true and that she's correct. The implication of that is Johnny Depp is a wife beater, and they haven't gone through due process. They're supposed to protect civil liberties and not make accusations like this on the public stage without due process. So I just found the emails to me just were very cynical.
This was definitely a landmark kind of moment in their journey from civil liberties organization into a more partisan kind of resistance-based organization that was happening in the Trump era and was coinciding with not just these pledges of multi-million dollars here, but tens of millions coming in from Democrats who were who were furious and frightened at having Trump in the White House and wanted to fund some organization that was going to protect what liberties remained, and then because they didn't trust the Democratic Party necessarily to do it, and so. But then it became then vested in that project. So,
right.
But
no, yeah, I think that's a totally fair description of what happened. And actually, in the emails, one of the ACLU staffers inadvertently refers to the Washington Post op-ed as an ad. And then takes it back and says the article, not the ad. But this is, there's definitely a huge fundraising push. And it does show, Ryan, this was the first thing you said, how easy it is to get caught up in fundraising over principle. And I do think the ACLU has sadly fallen prey to that.
Well, thank you, Emily. And everybody stick around. We'll have more Rising right after this.